The door slammed so hard it knocked Maggie Thornton backward into the snow. Her baby screamed. Her son lunged forward, fists raised, but she grabbed his arm before he could reach the store owner standing in the doorway. "You come back here again," the man said. "I'll call the sheriff." 5 children, 40 cents, and the 6th door today had just closed in her face. Maggie pulled herself up, snow soaking through her dress, and looked at her son. "Don't," she said quietly. "He ain't worth it." Behind them, the town watched. No one moved to help. Subscribe now and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below. Let me see how far this journey travels. "Mama, your lip's bleeding." Eleanor's small voice cut through the ringing in Maggie's ears. She touched her mouth, felt the warmth, tasted copper. "It's nothing." "It ain't nothing." Samuel stepped in front of her, 12 years old and shaking with rage. "That man pushed you. He put his hands on you and pushed you down like you was—" "Samuel," Maggie gripped his shoulders. "Look at me." He was crying, trying not to, jaw clenched tight, but the tears came anyway. "We don't fight battles we can't win," she said. "You hear me? We survive. That's what we do. We survive." "I hate this town." "I know. "I hate all of them." I know, baby. I know." Ruth tugged at Maggie's coat, her 7-year-old face pinched with cold. "Mama, Caleb's not talking anymore." Maggie turned. Her youngest boy stood perfectly still in the snow, arms hanging limp, eyes fixed on nothing. He'd stopped shivering. That was bad. When children stopped shivering, it meant the body was giving up. She knelt in front of him. Caleb, look at Mama." Nothing. "Caleb James Thornton, you look at me right now." His eyes slowly focused. "I'm tired, Mama." "I know you are, but you can't sleep yet. You understand? Not yet." "My feet don't hurt anymore." Maggie's heart seized. She yanked off his boots, pulled off his socks. His toes were white, waxy. "Sam, give me your scarf. Now." "But now." He unwound it fast, handed it over. Maggie ripped it in half, wrapped each piece around Caleb's feet, her hands shaking so badly she could barely tie the knots. "Eleanor, take Grace." Her 10-year-old daughter stepped forward, arms already reaching for the baby. Grace whimpered as she changed hands, but didn't cry. She'd stopped crying hours ago. Too weak, too cold. "Where are we going, Mama?" Eleanor asked. Her voice was steady, but her chin trembled. Maggie stood, looked around. The town of Silver Creek spread before them. Wooden buildings hunched against the wind, smoke rising from chimneys into a gray sky. People moved behind frost-covered windows. Warm, safe, looking out at her family like they were stray dogs. 6 places, 6 refusals. The church. "We'll pray for you, dear." The boarding house. $3 a night, no exceptions. The general store. The feed shop. The blacksmith. The livery. All the same answer wrapped in different words. "Go away. You're not our problem. You're not our people." "Mama?" Ruth's voice cracked. "Are we gonna die?" "No." "Promise?" Maggie looked at her daughter's face, blue-lipped and trusting, and lied. "I promise." "There's a road heading west," Samuel said. "I saw it when we came in. Goes out past the town toward the mountains." "What's out there?" "Don't know, but it ain't here." Maggie nodded. "Then we walk." They walked. The road turned to dirt, then to snow, then to nothing but white stretching toward distant peaks. The wind picked up teeth. It bit through their coats, their scarves, the thin wool mittens Maggie had knitted last winter when she still had a home. Eleanor started singing, some hymn their grandmother used to hum, her voice thin and breaking on the high notes. Ruth joined in, then stopped, too cold to make words. "Mama." Samuel fell into step beside her. "What if there ain't nothing out here?" "Then we keep walking till there is." "And if we freeze first?" Maggie didn't answer. Couldn't. They'd been walking maybe an hour when Caleb fell. He went down without a sound, face first into a drift. Maggie screamed his name, dropped to her knees, rolled him over. His eyes were closed. "Caleb! Caleb, wake up!" His eyelids fluttered. "Mama?" "Stay awake, baby. You gotta stay awake." "I'm so tired." I know you are." She lifted him, staggering under his weight. He was only 5, but felt like a sack of stones. "Sam, take your brother." Samuel gathered Caleb onto his back, gritting his teeth. "He's cold, Mama, real cold." "Keep him talking. Don't let him sleep." They walked. Ruth fell next, then Eleanor stumbled, almost dropping Grace. Maggie caught them both, held them up, forced them forward. One foot, then another, then another. The sun was sinking now, turning the snow pink and gold. Beautiful. Deadly. And then Samuel said, "Mama, look!" She raised her head. There, maybe half a mile ahead, rising from the white like a dream. Buildings. A barn. A house with smoke curling from the chimney. "You see that?" Eleanor whispered. "I see it." "Is it real?" "Only one way to find out." They walked faster now, hope giving them strength they didn't have. The ranch grew larger, more solid. A sign appeared above the gate, letters burned into weathered wood. McAllister Ranch. "Wait here," Maggie said. "Mama, no," Samuel started. "If something goes wrong, you take the children and run. Back toward town. Find the church. Tell them I sent you." "I ain't leaving you." "You'll do what I tell you." She touched his face. "You're the man now, Sam. Been the man since your father left. I need you to protect them. Can you do that?" His jaw tightened. Tears froze on his cheeks. "Yes, ma'am." She kissed his forehead. Then she walked toward the house. Halfway up the drive, the front door opened. A man stepped out onto the porch. Tall, broad, built like the mountains behind him. He wore a heavy coat and a hat pulled low. And even from 30 feet away, Maggie could see the scar running from his forehead past his left eye. He didn't speak, just stood there, watching her approach. Maggie stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "Sir?" Still nothing. "My name is Margaret Thornton. I got 5 children at your gate. We've been walking for 3 hours in this cold. Every door in town shut in my face today." She paused, drew a breath that burned her lungs. "I ain't asking for charity. I'm asking for work." The man's eyes moved past her, toward the gate where her children huddled together like frightened birds. "That your blood on your face?" he asked. His voice was low, rough. "Store owner pushed me down. Door caught my lip." "Which store owner?" "Does it matter?" "Might." Maggie shook her head. "I ain't here to make trouble for nobody. I just need work. I can cook, clean, mend what's torn. I'm good with numbers. I don't quit, and I don't complain." Her voice cracked, just barely. "Please, my boy's feet are frostbitten. My baby hasn't eaten proper in 2 days. I got nowhere else to go." The man studied her for a long moment. His face was unreadable. Stone and shadow and something else. Something that might have been recognition. "Where's your husband?" he asked. The question hit like a fist. Gone. Dead? Worse. He left. 8 months ago. Took what money we had and ran off with another woman. Left me with 5 children and a pile of debts I couldn't pay. So you're alone? I got my children. That ain't what I asked. Maggie lifted her chin. Yes, I'm alone. No husband, no family, no friends. Just me and 5 kids who ain't done nothing wrong except be born to a coward. She met his eyes. You want to judge me for that? Go ahead. Everyone else has. But I'm still standing here asking you for work. Not pity. Work. The silence stretched. Then the man did something none of the others had done. He nodded. What can you do? He asked. Maggie blinked. Sir? I asked what you can do. You said you can cook. How well? Well enough to feed a family of 6 on almost nothing for 8 months. Can you handle a kitchen? I can handle anything with a stove in it. Horses? Some. My father had a farm. Cattle? Less, but I learned fast. Another long pause. The wind howled between them. Then the man turned and called toward the barn. Silas! An older black man appeared in the doorway, wiping his hands on a rag. Yeah, boss? Get the wagon. There's children at the gate. Silas looked past the man, saw Maggie standing there bloody and half-frozen, and understanding crossed his face. Yes, sir. Right away. The man turned back to Maggie. Name's Jacob McAllister. This is my ranch. I know. Saw the sign. You'll stay in the bunkhouse tonight. Ain't fancy, but it's dry and there's a stove. Tomorrow we'll see what you can do. Maggie's legs nearly buckled. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You ain't seen the work. He walked past her, heading toward the gate. Maggie turned and watched him go. This stranger with his scarred face and his rough voice, walking through the snow toward her children like he had a right to. She should be afraid. She knew that. An isolated ranch, a man she'd known for all of 3 minutes. No one knowing where they were. But fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. Jacob reached the gate. She saw him crouch down, heard the low rumble of his voice, though she couldn't make out the words. Saw Ruth pull back at first, then slowly step forward. Saw Caleb lift his head. Mama! Caleb's voice carried across the snow. Mama, the man says he's got hot soup. Something cracked in Maggie's chest. That's right, baby, she called back. We're going to get you warmed up. Silas appeared with the wagon. He helped Eleanor climb in first, then Ruth, then lifted Caleb like he weighed nothing at all. Samuel hesitated at the tailgate. Get in, son, Silas said quietly. Ain't nothing in there gonna hurt you. Sam looked at Maggie. She nodded. He climbed in. Jacob walked beside the wagon as it rolled toward the house. Maggie fell into step with him, Grace shifting weakly against her chest. The bunkhouse is around back, he said. Used to be for hired hands. Ain't had any in 2 winters. Why not? Couldn't afford 'em. He glanced at her. Ranch ain't what it used to be. But you're taking us in anyway. Appears so. Why? Jacob didn't answer right away. They walked in silence past the barn, past a corral where horses stood steaming in the cold, toward a small building with frost on the windows. I had a wife once, he said finally, and a baby girl. They died birthing her. 8 years ago this spring. Maggie's breath caught. I remember what it was like, he continued, voice flat. That feeling when you'd do anything, give anything, just to keep them safe one more day. He looked at her children in the wagon, saw that same look in your eyes at the gate. They reached the bunkhouse, Silas jumped down and opened the door. "Get a fire going," Jacob told him. "And bring food from the house, whatever's warm." "Yes, sir." Jacob turned to Maggie. "You need anything else tonight? Knock on the main house door. I'm usually up late." "Mr. McAllister." "Jacob." "Jacob." She held his gaze. "I won't make you regret this." He tipped his hat. "See that you don't." Then he was gone, walking back toward the house, tall and straight against the darkening sky. Maggie watched him go. "Mama?" Eleanor tugged her sleeve. "Mama, can we go inside now? Ruth's shaking again." "Yes, baby, yes, let's go inside." The bunkhouse was small. 2 rooms, a stove, a table, 2 beds pushed against the walls. But it was warm. Warmer than anything they'd known in weeks. Samuel got the fire going while Eleanor helped Ruth out of her wet coat. Caleb sat on the floor near the stove, his face slowly regaining color, his eyes regaining life. "Mama," he said, "my feet are tingling." "That's good, baby. That means the blood's coming back." "It tickles." He wiggled his toes and giggled, the first happy sound Maggie had heard from him in days. She almost cried, bit it back. Silas arrived with food, stew thick with potato and venison, bread still warm from the oven, a jug of milk for the baby. He set it on the table without ceremony. "You need anything else, ma'am, just holler. I'm in the barn most nights." "Thank you for everything." He tipped his hat. "Ain't nothing, ma'am. Mr. McAllister's a good man. He sees someone hurting, he helps. That's just how he's made." Then he was gone, and they were alone. They ate in silence, the desperate, focused silence of people who hadn't tasted real food in days. Grace drank the milk greedily, then fell asleep against Maggie's chest, her small body finally warm, finally full. Ruth and Caleb were next, curling together on one of the beds like puppies. Eleanor tucked the blanket around them, then crawled in beside them. Samuel sat by the stove, staring at the flames. "You should sleep," Maggie said. "Can't." "Why not?" "Keep thinking about that store owner, the way he pushed you." His hands curled into fists. "I wanted to kill him, Mama. I really wanted to kill him." Maggie sat down beside her son. He was 12 years old. He should be thinking about fishing and girls and what he wanted to be when he grew up. Instead, he was thinking about murder. "Your father used to have a temper like that," she said quietly. Sam flinched. "I ain't nothing like him." "I know, but that anger, it'll eat you alive if you let it. Trust me, I've seen it happen." "How do you do it?" He looked at her, eyes bright. "How do you stay so calm when everyone treats us like dirt?" "I ain't calm, baby. I'm terrified every minute of every day. I just don't let it show." "Why not?" "Because you're watching." She touched his face. "All of you are watching. And if I break down, you'll break down. And if we all break down, we die." She paused. "So I don't break down. Not where anyone can see." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "That man," he said finally, "Mr. McAllister, you think we can trust him?" "I don't know. He seems different." "He does." "Think he'll let us stay?" Maggie looked around the bunkhouse, at the fire crackling in the stove, at her children sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, at the roof overhead keeping out the snow and the wind and the cold. "I don't know," she said again, "but I'm going to work so hard he won't want us to leave." Samuel nodded slowly. Then he stood, stretched, and walked toward the back room. "Night, Mama." "Night, baby." She sat alone by the stove for a long time after he left. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Grace slept warm against her heart. Tomorrow, she would prove herself. Tomorrow, she would show Jacob McAllister that she wasn't just some desperate woman begging for scraps. Tomorrow, she would start building a life. But tonight she let herself feel it. The relief, the gratitude, the fragile, dangerous thing that might be hope. She was almost asleep when she heard it. Hoofbeats, coming fast up the drive. Maggie's eyes snapped open. A man's voice cut through the night, sharp and urgent. "Jacob! Jacob McAllister!" She was on her feet in an instant. Grace clutched tight against her chest. Through the frost-covered window, she could see a figure on horseback, lanterns swinging wild, snow flying up around the horse's hooves. The main house door banged open. Jacob stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand. "Who's there?" "It's Dawson from town. Sheriff sent me." "What's wrong?" The rider pulled up, horse stamping and snorting. "Got a telegram, Jacob, from Missouri. Man named Victor Thornton's been asking around, looking for a woman and 5 children." The rider paused. "Says they belong to him." Maggie's blood turned to ice. Victor, Thomas's brother. The lawyer with the cold eyes and the cruel smile, who told her once at a family dinner that women like her were only good for 2 things: bearing children and keeping quiet. He'd found her. He'd found them. Through the window, she saw Jacob turn his head, saw him look directly at the bunkhouse, directly at her. Their eyes met through the glass. And Maggie knew with terrible certainty that the running wasn't over. It had only just begun. Maggie didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, Grace heavy and warm against her chest, watching the main house. The rider had left an hour ago. Jacob's light stayed on. Around midnight, the front door opened. Jacob stepped onto the porch, looked straight at the bunkhouse, and started walking. Maggie's heart hammered. She set Grace down gently, covered her with a blanket, and met him at the door before he could knock. "Your children asleep?" he asked. "Yes." "Good. We need to talk." She stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind her. The cold bit into her skin, but she barely felt it. Fear kept her warm. "Victor Thornton," Jacob said. "That name means something to you?" "He's my husband's brother." "The husband that ran off?" "Yes." Jacob nodded slowly. "Telegram says he's claiming you stole those children. Says you ran off in the night without cause. Says he's got legal papers." Maggie's hands curled into fists. "That's a lie." "Which part?" "All of it." She stepped closer, voice low and fierce. "Thomas left us. No warning, no money, no nothing. I waited 3 months for him to come back. 3 months of selling everything we owned just to buy bread. When the sheriff came to throw us out of our house, I took my children and I left. That ain't stealing. That's surviving." "And Victor?" "Victor never cared about those children. Never visited, never sent a letter. He's a lawyer, Mr. McAllister. He sees opportunity, not family." "What kind of opportunity?" Maggie hesitated. This was the part she hadn't told anyone. "My father died last spring," she said quietly. "Left a small inheritance. Nothing much. Couple $100, a piece of land back in Ohio. But it's in the children's names. All 5 of them. And Victor," she swallowed. "Victor's been trying to get his hands on it since the day he heard about it." Jacob was quiet for a long moment. The wind pushed snow against their legs. "So this ain't about the children," he said finally. "No, it's about money. It's always about money with Victor." "What happens if he finds you?" "He'll take them. He'll find some judge to give him custody, claim I'm unfit, and he'll take them." Her voice cracked. and then he'll have control of the inheritance. And my children will be raised by a man who sees them as ledger entries." Jacob looked at her. Really looked. His dark eyes moved over her face like he was reading something written there. "You got any proof?" he asked. "That Thomas left? That you didn't steal nothing?" "I got witnesses back in Missouri. Neighbors who saw him drive away. The sheriff who threw us out." "That might help. Might not." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Victor's a lawyer, you said?" "Yes." "Then he knows how to play this game. Knows what judges want to hear."
"I know."
Maggie's voice dropped to a whisper.
"I know I can't beat him. Not in a court. Not alone."
The silence stretched between them. Then Jacob said something she didn't expect. "You ain't alone." Maggie looked up. "You work for me now," he continued. "That means you're under my roof, my protection." His jaw tightened. "Any man comes here trying to take children from their mother, he's going to have to go through me first." "Why?" The word came out before she could stop it. "Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't know if I'm telling the truth." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed and worn at the creases. "My wife's name was Sarah," he said. "She was 19 when I married her. 20 when she died." He unfolded the paper. A letter, Maggie realized. "She wrote this the night before our daughter was born. Said she had a feeling something might go wrong. Said if it did, she wanted me to know she wasn't afraid." Maggie's throat tightened. "She asked me one thing," Jacob continued. "Said if I ever met a woman alone in the world, a woman fighting to protect her children, I should help her. Because that's what she would have done." He folded the letter and put it back in his pocket. "I ain't helping you because I know you're telling the truth, Mrs. Thornton. I'm helping you because my wife asked me to, 8 years ago, and I ain't about to start breaking promises to her now." Maggie couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. "Get some sleep," Jacob said. "Tomorrow we got work to do, and if Victor Thornton shows up here, we'll deal with him together." He tipped his hat and walked back toward the house. Maggie stood in the cold for a long time after he left, watching his footprints fill with snow. Then she went inside, lay down beside her children, and cried. Not from fear, not from sadness, from something else entirely. The next morning, Maggie was up before dawn. She found Jacob in the barn, shoulders deep in feed sacks, same as before. But this time, when she walked in, he looked up. "You're early?" "Couldn't sleep." "Me neither." He straightened, brushed hay from his coat. "You know how to milk a cow?" "I can learn." "That ain't what I asked." "Then no, I don't know how to milk a cow." Jacob almost smiled. "Honest? That's good. Come on." He led her to a stall in the back, where a brown cow stood chewing peacefully. "This is Bessie. She's old and mean, and she'll kick you if you ain't careful. But she gives good milk." "How do I not get kicked?" "Talk to her. Let her know you're there. Don't make sudden moves." He grabbed a stool and a bucket, set them beside the cow. "Sit here. Hands here. Squeeze and pull, gentle but firm. Like this." He demonstrated once, twice. Milk hissed into the bucket. "Now you try." Maggie sat down. Her hands were shaking, cold and nerves, but she positioned them the way he'd shown her. Squeezed, pulled. Nothing. "Harder," Jacob said. "She ain't made of glass." She tried again. This time, a thin stream of milk hit the bucket. "There you go." "It's not much." "It's a start. Keep at it." He watched her for a few more minutes, correcting her grip, adjusting her position. Then he stepped back. "I gotta check the fences. Be back in a couple hours." Think you can handle this?
Yes.
Good. He paused at the stall door. Your children are welcome to explore. Just keep them away from the horses till I can teach them proper.
I will. Thank you.
He nodded and was gone. Maggie milked the cow. It took her nearly an hour to fill the bucket, and her arms ached like she'd been lifting stones. But she did it. When she carried the milk back to the main house, Silas was waiting on the porch. Mr. McAllister said you might need help finding the kitchen, he said. I'd appreciate that. He led her inside.
The house was bigger than it looked from outside. A main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with a cast-iron stove, a hallway leading to what she assumed were bedrooms.
Pantry's through there, Silas said. Got flour, sugar, salt, some preserves from last summer, bacon in the cold box.
This is more than I've seen in months.
Mr. McAllister believes in being prepared. Silas leaned against the counter. He tell you about Victor Thornton? Maggie's stomach clenched.
He told me.
That man's going to come here sooner or later. You know that, right?
I know.
And when he does, it's going to get ugly.
I know that, too.
Silas nodded slowly. Good. Long as you're not fooling yourself. He straightened. You need anything? I'm in the barn. And ma'am?
Yes?
Mr. McAllister don't let people in easy. Took me 3 years before he'd eat dinner at the same table as me. You've been here one night, and he's already fighting for you. He paused. Don't make him regret that. Then he was gone. Maggie stood alone in the kitchen, the weight of his words settling on her shoulders. Don't make him regret that. She wouldn't. She couldn't. She started cooking. By the time Jacob returned from checking fences, the kitchen smelled like fresh bread and bacon and something sweet bubbling on the stove. He stopped in the doorway, hat in hand, and stared. You made pie.
Apple. Found some preserves in the pantry.
I haven't had pie in 2 years.
Then you're overdue.
He hung his hat on the peg by the door and sat down at the table. Maggie set a plate in front of him. Bacon, eggs, fresh bread, a slice of pie on the side. He ate in silence. She watched from the stove, hands busy with dishes, but her eyes kept drifting to his face. When he finished, he pushed back from the table and said, That was the best meal I've had since Sarah died. Maggie's cheeks flushed.
It wasn't much.
It was plenty. He stood. Your children eat?
Yes.
Took them breakfast at the bunkhouse. They should eat here, with us. Maggie blinked. Sir? They're not hired hands, Mrs. Thornton. They're children. They should eat at a proper table. He grabbed his hat. Tomorrow morning, all of them. Understood?
Yes, thank you.
He nodded and headed for the door, then stopped. That boy of yours, Samuel.
What about him?
He's got a temper. Maggie's stomach dropped.
Did he do something?
Tried to help me with the fences this morning. When a post fell on his foot, he cursed loud enough to scare the horses.
I'm sorry. I'll talk to him.
Don't. Jacob turned. I ain't complaining. Boy's got fire. Just needs to learn how to control it. He paused. I could use help with the horses tomorrow. Think he'd be interested? Maggie thought of Samuel, 12 years old and desperate for purpose.
I think he'd like that very much.
Good. Tell him to meet me at the stables after breakfast. Then he was gone. Maggie leaned against the counter and let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The days fell into rhythm after that. Maggie rose before dawn, made breakfast for everyone, then spent the morning working alongside Jacob and Silas. She learned to milk cows without getting kicked, learned to gather eggs without dropping them, learned to chop firewood with an axe that weighed almost as much as she did. The children found their places too. Samuel followed Jacob everywhere, soaking up everything the man taught him like a sponge. He came home at night exhausted and happy, talking about horses and fences and the right way to shoe a hoof. Eleanor discovered the books. Jacob had a shelf full of them: old westerns, farm almanacs, a few novels with cracked spines and yellowed pages. She devoured them all, then started reading to Ruth and Caleb every night before bed. Ruth slowly came out of her shell. She started talking to Silas, who taught her how to feed the chickens. Within a week, she had names for all of them. Caleb was everywhere at once, getting into everything, driving everyone crazy. But his feet healed, his cheeks filled out. He laughed more than he had in months. And Grace started walking. Wobbly, uncertain steps across the bunkhouse floor, reaching for Maggie's hands. It should have been perfect, but Victor's shadow hung over everything. 3 days after the telegram, another rider came, this time with a letter. Jacob brought it to the bunkhouse that evening, his face grim. "It's from a lawyer in Greeley," he said, acting on behalf of Victor Thornton. Maggie's hands trembled as she opened it. The words swam before her eyes. Custody hearing, unfit mother, legal guardian, evidence of abandonment. "When?" she managed. 2 weeks. They're scheduling a hearing at the courthouse in town. 2 weeks, she laughed, but there was no humor in it. 2 weeks to prove I'm not a monster. You ain't a monster. Tell that to the judge. She sank onto the bed, the letter crumpling in her fist. I don't have money for a lawyer. I don't have proof. I don't have anything except my word, and my word don't mean nothing against a man in a fancy suit with legal papers. Jacob sat down beside her. Not too close, just close enough. You got more than your word, he said quietly. Like what? Like me. Maggie looked at him. I'm a landowner, he continued. Been in this territory 15 years. People know me, trust me. If I stand up in that courtroom and say you're a good mother, that means something. Why would you do that? Because it's true. The simple certainty in his voice broke something in her. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. Hey, Jacob's voice softened. Hey now, don't do that. I'm sorry, she wiped her face. I don't usually cry. I know. I've seen you face down worse than this without flinching. He paused. That's how I know you're scared. I'm terrified. Good. Means you understand what's at stake. He stood. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we start preparing. Preparing for what? For war. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Maggie's life. Jacob hired a lawyer from town, a young man named Henry Dawes, who wore spectacles and spoke too fast, but knew the law inside and out. The problem, Henry said, spreading papers across Jacob's kitchen table, is that Victor Thornton has resources. He can afford to hire investigators, bribe witnesses, drag this out for months. And we can't, Maggie said. No, but we have something he doesn't. What's that? The truth. Henry looked at her. You said there were witnesses in Missouri, people who saw Thomas leave. Yes, the sheriff, some neighbors. Can they be reached by letter? Maybe. I don't know if they'd help. We have to try. He scribbled notes. I'll send telegrams today. In the meantime, we need to build a picture of your life here. Show the judge that your children are safe, healthy, thriving. They are, Jacob said. I know, but we need to prove it. Documentation, witnesses, people from town who can testify to Mrs. Thornton's character. Maggie laughed bitterly. People in town think I'm a beggar who seduced a rancher. Then we changed their minds. Easier said than done, but they tried. Maggie went into town with Jacob the following morning. She held her head high as they walked down the main street, ignoring the whispers, the stares, the women who crossed to the other side to avoid her. Jacob introduced her at the general store, the same store where she'd been pushed to the ground. The owner, a man named Garrett, looked at her with narrowed eyes. "You're the woman from before." "I am." "Heard you're living out at McAllister's place now." "I work for him, me and my children." Garrett snorted. "Work."
That's what they're calling it? Jacob stepped forward. You got something to say, Garrett? The store owner paled.
"Just making conversation." "Then make it respectful." Jacob's voice was ice. "Mrs. Thornton is under my protection. Anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. We clear?" Garrett swallowed. "Clear." They left the store in silence. "Thank you," Maggie said when they were outside. "Don't thank me. Man's a coward. Always has been." "Still, you didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." She looked at him, this hard, quiet man who kept showing up for her, and felt something shift in her chest. Something dangerous. Something that felt a lot like hope. The night before the hearing, Maggie couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch of the bunkhouse, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. The children were asleep inside. Grace had finally stopped fussing around midnight. Footsteps crunched in the snow. Jacob appeared out of the darkness, carrying 2 cups of something steaming. "Coffee," he said, handing her one. "Figured you'd be up." "Figured right." He sat down beside her on the step, not touching, but close. They drank in silence for a while. "You scared?" he asked finally. "Terrified." "You hide it well." "Had a lot of practice." Another silence. "Jacob." "If this goes wrong tomorrow," she swallowed, "if they take my children, I want you to know that these past 2 weeks, they've been the best weeks I've had in years. Maybe ever." He turned to look at her. "You gave us a home," she continued. "You gave my son a purpose. You gave my daughters safety. You gave me—" She stopped. Couldn't finish. "Gave you what?" She met his eyes. "Hope." The word hung in the cold air between them. Jacob set down his cup. Slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a wild animal, he reached out and took her hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, warm. "We ain't gonna lose tomorrow," he said. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." "How?" He squeezed her hand. "Because I ain't letting you fight alone. Not tomorrow. Not ever." Maggie's breath caught. For a moment, just a moment, she let herself imagine a future where this was real, where this man was hers and she was his, and they raised her children together on this land. Then she pulled back. "We should get some sleep," she said. "Maggie, don't." She stood, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. "Don't make me promises you can't keep. Not tonight." Jacob stood too. "I don't make promises I can't keep." "Everyone says that." "I ain't everyone." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she hadn't planned. She kissed him. Just briefly. Just enough to feel the warmth of his mouth, the scratch of his beard, the sharp intake of his breath. Then she pulled back. "That wasn't a promise," she said. "That was a thank you." She went inside before he could respond, but through the window she saw him standing there for a long time, touching his lips, staring at the door she'd closed behind her. And despite everything, the hearing tomorrow, Victor waiting like a snake in the grass, the uncertainty of everything, she smiled. Just a little. Just enough. The courthouse in Silver Creek was nothing more than a converted saloon with a judge's bench where the bar used to be. Maggie stood outside in the cold morning light, her children gathered around her, and tried to remember how to breathe. "Mama," Samuel touched her arm. "You're shaking." I'm fine. You ain't fine. You're scared. She looked at her son, 12 years old, standing tall, jaw set like a man twice his age. Yes, I'm scared, but I'm still going in there. We all are, Eleanor said, holding Grace tight against her chest. We're not letting you do this alone. Ruth slipped her small hand into Maggie's. I'll be brave, Mama. I promise. Caleb tugged at her skirt. What if the bad man tries to take us? Maggie knelt down, looked him in the eyes. Then I'll fight him. You understand? Nobody takes you from me. Nobody. The courthouse door opened. Henry Dawes stood in the doorway, face pale. They're ready for us, Mrs. Thornton. Maggie stood, squeezed Ruth's hand. Let's go. They walked inside. The room was packed. Farmers, shopkeepers, women in bonnets, men in dusty coats. Half the town had turned out to watch. Maggie felt their eyes on her like needles. Curious, judging, waiting to see her fail. At the front of the room, behind a table covered in papers, sat a man she hadn't seen in over a year. Victor Thornton. He looked the same, tall, thin, dressed in a suit that cost more than everything Maggie owned. His hair was slicked back, his smile polished, his eyes cold as river stones. When he saw her, that smile widened. Margaret, he said, rising, you look well, considering. Maggie said nothing, just walked past him to her seat. Jacob was already there, sitting behind the defendant's table, hat in his lap. When she sat down, he leaned forward. You all right? No. Good. Means you're paying attention. The judge entered, a gray-haired woman named Clara Hutchins, who walked with a cane and looked like she'd seen every kind of human wickedness and stopped being surprised by any of it. This court is now in session, she said, settling into her chair. We're here to determine custody of the minor children of Thomas and Margaret Thornton. Mr. Thornton, you've filed a petition claiming Mrs. Thornton is unfit. Let's hear it. Victor stood, buttoning his coat with practiced ease. Thank you, Your Honor. This is a simple case, really. My brother Thomas, God rest his soul. Objection! Henry was on his feet. Thomas Thornton is not deceased. Victor's smile flickered. A figure of speech, Counselor. My brother Thomas left the family home 8 months ago, under circumstances that remain unclear. What is clear is that his wife, he gestured toward Maggie, subsequently abandoned the marital residence, took the children without consent, and fled across state lines. That's a lie, Maggie said. The judge's gaze snapped to her. Mrs. Thornton, you'll have your turn. Continue, Mr. Thornton. Victor inclined his head. Since her arrival in Colorado, Mrs. Thornton has been living in the home of an unmarried man. He let that hang in the air. A man she'd known for less than a day before moving into his residence. One can only imagine what kind of environment this creates for 5 impressionable children. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Furthermore, Victor continued, I have documentation showing that Mrs. Thornton's children are heirs to a modest inheritance from their late grandfather. An inheritance that Mrs. Thornton has sole access to as their guardian. He paused dramatically. One might wonder if her flight from Missouri had less to do with escaping a difficult marriage and more to do with securing those funds for herself. That's enough. Jacob's voice cut through the room like a blade. The judge raised an eyebrow. And you are? Jacob McAllister, Your Honor, owner of the ranch where Mrs. Thornton works. Works? Victor's tone dripped with insinuation. Is that what we're calling it? Jacob stood slowly. He was taller than Victor, broader, and when he spoke, his voice was steady as stone. Mrs. Thornton is my employee. She cooks, cleans, and helps maintain my property. She and her children live in a separate building on my land, I have never touched her inappropriately. I have never asked anything of her except honest work." He turned to face Victor directly. "Which is more than can be said for the man standing across from me, who's never done an honest day's work in his life." The crowd stirred. Victor's smile thinned.
"Personal attacks won't help your case, Mr. McAllister. Neither will lies, but you seem determined to tell them anyway." "Gentlemen," the judge's cane cracked against the floor. "That's enough. Mr. Dawes, your response?" Henry stood, shuffling his papers nervously. "Your Honor, Mr. Thornton's claims are without merit. Mrs. Thornton did not abandon her home. She was evicted after her husband disappeared, leaving her with no money and no means of support. She traveled to Colorado seeking work, which she found at Mr. McAllister's ranch. The living arrangement is entirely appropriate." "And the inheritance?" the judge asked. "The inheritance is held in trust for the children. Mrs. Thornton has not touched a cent of it. She's been supporting her family through her own labor." Victor stepped forward. "Your Honor, with respect, Mr. Dawes has no proof of any of this. No documentation, no witnesses. Just the word of a woman who fled in the night like a thief." "I have witnesses." Everyone turned. Maggie was standing, hands clenched at her sides. "I have witnesses, Your Honor. People back in Missouri who saw everything. Who saw Thomas drive away. Who saw me wait for months. Who saw the sheriff come and throw us out." "And where are these witnesses?" Victor asked smoothly. "I don't see them in this courtroom." "They're coming." "Are they?" Victor's eyebrows rose. "Or is this another desperate lie from a desperate woman?" The door at the back of the courtroom banged open. Everyone turned. A man stood in the doorway, covered in snow, breathing hard. He was older, maybe 60, with a weathered face and a star pinned to his chest. "Sorry I'm late," he said, stomping snow off his boots. "Train got stuck outside Denver. Had to ride the last 40 miles. Maggie's heart stopped. "Sheriff Perkins?" she whispered. The old man walked down the aisle, nodding to her as he passed. "Mrs. Thornton. Told you I'd come if you ever needed me." "You know this woman?" the judge asked. "Yes, ma'am. Knew her husband, too. Sorry excuse for a man, if you'll pardon my saying so." He reached the front of the room and faced Victor. "And I know this one. Came sniffing around Missouri a few months back, asking questions about the Thornton children. Asking about their inheritance." Victor's face went pale. "I was simply concerned about my nieces and nephews." "Concerned," Sheriff Perkins laughed, a harsh sound. "That's one word for it. Another word would be scheming. I heard what you told Judge Morrison back home. Said you wanted custody so you could protect the children's financial interests." He turned to Judge Hutchins. "I got the letter right here, Your Honor, written in his own hand." He pulled a folded paper from his coat and handed it to the judge. The room was silent as she read. When she looked up, her eyes were hard. "Mr. Thornton," she said slowly, "this letter suggests that your primary interest in these children is not their welfare, but their inheritance. Would you care to explain?" Victor's polished composure cracked. "That letter is taken out of context." "Is it?" The judge set the paper down. "Because it reads very clearly to me. You state, and I quote, 'Once I have legal custody, I will have full control over the trust. The children themselves are of secondary concern.'" Gasps rippled through the crowd. "That's not, I didn't mean—" Victor turned to Maggie, and for the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. "Margaret, surely you understand. I was only trying to protect the family." "You were trying to protect yourself." Maggie's voice was quiet, but it carried through the silent room. "You never cared about those children. You never visited them. Never sent them birthday gifts. Never asked how they were doing in school. The only time you ever showed any interest in them was when you found out they had something you wanted." "That's not true." It is true, and everyone in this room knows it. Victor turned to the judge, desperation bleeding through his mask. Your Honor, regardless of my personal motivations, the fact remains that this woman is living in sin with an unmarried man. That alone should disqualify her from— Mr. McAllister. Jacob stood. Yes, Your Honor? Is there anything improper about your relationship with Mrs. Thornton? No, ma'am. She works for me, that's all. And you have no romantic intentions toward her? Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Maggie, and something passed between them, something the whole room could see. I intend to marry her, he said, if she'll have me. The crowd erupted. Maggie stared at him, heart pounding. Jacob, not now, he said quietly. Just trust me. The judge banged her cane until the room quieted. Mr. McAllister, are you proposing marriage to Mrs. Thornton in my courtroom? I am. And Mrs. Thornton, what is your response? Every eye in the room turned to her. Victor's face was twisted with fury. Henry looked shocked. The children were staring at her with wide, hopeful eyes. And Jacob? Jacob was looking at her like she was the only person in the room. Yes, Maggie said. Yes, I'll marry him. The judge nodded slowly. Well, that certainly changes things. She turned to Victor. Mr. Thornton, your primary argument against Mrs. Thornton's fitness as a mother was her living arrangement. That argument is now moot. Furthermore, this letter suggests that your interest in these children is financial rather than paternal. She paused. I'm dismissing your petition. You can't! I can, and I am. The judge stood. Mrs. Thornton retains full custody of her children. The inheritance remains in trust for them, administered by their mother. And Mr. Thornton, her eyes narrowed. If I hear of you harassing this family again, I will personally see to it that you're brought up on charges. Are we clear? Victor's jaw worked. For a moment, Maggie thought he might argue. Then he grabbed his hat and stormed out of the courtroom. The door slammed behind him. And then, chaos. Samuel was the first to reach her, throwing his arms around her waist. Mama! Mama, we won! Eleanor was crying. Ruth was laughing. Caleb was jumping up and down. And Grace was reaching for her with chubby hands, squealing with joy, even though she had no idea what was happening. Maggie gathered them all in, held them tight, felt their hearts beating against hers. They were safe. They were hers. Nobody could take them. Through the crowd of bodies, she found Jacob's eyes. He was standing apart, watching her with that quiet intensity that made her stomach flip. You proposed to me, she said. I did. In front of everyone. Seemed like the thing to do. She pushed through her children, walked up to him, and stopped just inches away. Did you mean it? I don't say things I don't mean. Jacob McAllister, you barely know me. I know enough. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I know you're the strongest woman I ever met. I know you love your children more than your own life. I know you make the best apple pie I ever tasted. His mouth twitched. And I know that when you kissed me last night, I felt something I ain't felt in 8 years. Maggie's breath caught. So yes, he said. I meant it. Every word. Around them, the townspeople were watching, whispering, but Maggie didn't care. Let them watch. Let them whisper. She reached up, took Jacob's face in her hands, and kissed him. Not a quick kiss like last night. A real kiss. Deep and slow and full of everything she couldn't put into words. When she pulled back, his eyes were bright. Is that a yes? He asked. I already said yes. Say it again. She smiled. really smiled for the first time in months.
Yes, Jacob McAllister. I'll marry you.
He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her, and held on like he'd never let go. Over his shoulder, Maggie saw her children watching. Samuel had his arm around Eleanor. Ruth was holding Caleb's hand. Grace was chewing on her fist, oblivious to everything. They were a family, broken and battered and stitched together from scraps, but a family nonetheless. And for the first time since Thomas had driven away, leaving her with nothing but 5 hungry mouths and a pile of debt, Maggie let herself believe that everything might actually be okay. Sheriff Perkins appeared at her elbow. "Congratulations, Mrs. Thornton, or should I say, future Mrs. McAllister?" Maggie laughed. "I don't even know what to call myself anymore." "Call yourself happy," the old man smiled. "That's all that matters."
Sheriff, why did you come all this way?
"Got a telegram from your lawyer here." He nodded at Henry, who was still looking stunned. "Said you needed help. Said your children were in danger." He shrugged. "I remembered you, Mrs. Thornton. Remembered how hard you fought to keep your family together after that no-good husband of yours left. Figured the least I could do was tell the truth about what happened."
Thank you. Maggie's voice cracked. I don't know how I'll ever repay you.
"Don't need repayment. Just raise those children right. That's payment enough." He tipped his hat and walked away. Jacob squeezed her hand. "Ready to go home?" Home. The word felt strange on her tongue. For so long, home had been a memory, a place she used to belong before everything fell apart. Now it was something else, something new, something she was building with her own 2 hands. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." They walked out of the courthouse together, children trailing behind, into a world that looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago, but felt completely different. The wagon was waiting outside. Silas stood by the horses, hat in hand. "Heard you won," he said. "We did. Heard something else, too." His eyes twinkled. "Something about a wedding?" Maggie felt her cheeks flush. "Word travels fast. In this town, faster than lightning." He helped her into the wagon, then lifted the children up one by one. "Congratulations, ma'am. Mr. McAllister's a good man. He'll take care of you." "I know," Maggie said, "but I don't need taking care of. I need a partner." Silas grinned. "Then you found the right one." Jacob climbed up beside her, took the reins. "Everyone settled?" A chorus of yeses from the back. "Then let's go home." The horses started forward. Maggie leaned against Jacob's shoulder, watching the town fall away behind them. The buildings got smaller. The people disappeared. Soon there was nothing but white fields and gray sky and the mountains rising in the distance like a promise.
"Jacob? What happens now?"
He was quiet for a moment. "Now, we go home. We eat dinner, we put the children to bed, and tomorrow, we start building something."
"Building what?"
"A life," he looked at her. "A real one. Together." Maggie's heart swelled.
"I'd like that,"
she said. "Good." He turned back to the road. "Because I ain't planning on letting you go. Not now, not ever." She smiled and closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of the wagon rock her gently. For the first time in 8 months, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. For the first time in 8 months, she was looking forward to it. The wedding was held 3 days later. It was small, just Silas, Sheriff Perkins, who'd decided to stay a few extra days, and the preacher from town. But it was real. More real than anything Maggie had experienced in years.
She wore her best dress, the blue one she'd worn to the barn dance,
Altered by Eleanor's careful stitches. Jacob wore a clean shirt and his good boots,
the ones he'd told her he hadn't worn since his father's funeral. The children stood in a row, scrubbed and combed and solemn as owls. The preacher read the words. Maggie said her vows. Jacob said his. And when he kissed her, soft and certain, she felt something shift in the universe, like a door closing on the past and a window opening to the future. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said. Samuel stepped forward. "Does this mean you're our pa now?" Jacob looked at the boy, this fierce, angry, protective boy who'd been carrying the weight of a man since his father left. "Only if you want me to be," he said. Samuel glanced at his mother. She nodded. "Then yeah," Sam said. "I reckon you are." Jacob held out his hand. Samuel shook it, and Ruth, who'd barely spoken to anyone but her mother since leaving Missouri, walked up to Jacob and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not letting the bad man take us." Jacob's face crumpled, just for a moment. Then he knelt down, gathered Ruth in his arms, and held her. "Nobody's ever going to take you," he said. "Not while I'm breathing. You hear me? Nobody." Ruth nodded against his chest. Maggie watched them, her new husband, her children, this family they built from nothing, and felt tears streaming down her face. Happy tears. Finally, happy tears. That night, after the children were asleep, Maggie stood on the porch of the main house, her house now, and looked out at the land. Snow covered everything, the barn, the corral, the distant mountains. The world was white and silent and peaceful. Jacob came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "You all right?" "Better than all right. Regrets?" She turned in his arms, looked up at him. "Not a single one." He kissed her forehead. "Good, because you're stuck with me now, Mrs. McAllister." Mrs. McAllister. The name felt strange, foreign, but not wrong. "I can live with that," she said. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other, watching the stars appear one by one in the cold, black sky. Somewhere inside, one of the children laughed, and Maggie thought, This is what I've been looking for. This is what I almost died trying to find. Not a place, not safety, not even love. Just this moment, this feeling. Home. Winter tightened its grip on the valley. Maggie woke before dawn every morning, made breakfast for 7 people, and spent the rest of her days learning what it meant to be a rancher's wife. Her hands cracked and bled from the cold. Her back ached from hauling water and chopping wood, but every night she fell asleep beside a man who looked at her like she was made of something precious. 3 weeks after the wedding, the first real storm hit. Jacob came in from the barn with snow in his beard and worry in his eyes. "Barometer's dropping fast. This one's going to be bad." "How bad?" "Bad enough." He pulled off his gloves, flexed his frozen fingers. "I need to bring the cattle closer. They're scattered across the north pasture. If the storm catches them out there, we'll lose half the herd." "I'll help." "No, you stay with the children." "Jacob." "Maggie." He took her face in his hands. "I need to know you're safe. I can't be out there worrying about you and the cattle both." She wanted to argue, wanted to prove she was strong enough to ride beside him. But she saw the fear in his eyes, real fear, the kind he never showed, and she understood. "Be careful," she said. "Always am." He kissed her hard, then grabbed his coat and was gone. The storm hit 2 hours later. It came howling out of the mountains like something alive, like something angry. Wind slammed against the house so hard the windows rattled. Snow piled against the doors. The temperature dropped so fast that ice formed on the inside of the glass. Maggie gathered the children in the main room, fed the fire until it roared, and tried not to think about Jacob out there in the white hell. "Mama?" Samuel stood by the window, trying to see through the wall of snow. "Mama, it's been 4 hours." "I know." "He should be back by now." "I know." "What if something happened?" "Nothing happened." Maggie's voice was sharper than she meant it to be. "Your father knows this land better than anyone. He'll be fine." Father. The word had slipped out before she could stop it. Samuel noticed. His eyes widened. "I meant," Maggie started. "It's okay." Samuel's voice was quiet. I like it when you call him that." Maggie pulled her son close. "He's coming back. You hear me? He's coming back." But the hours crawled by, and Jacob didn't come. By nightfall, the storm was so bad Maggie couldn't see the barn from the window. She put the younger children to bed, but Samuel refused to leave her side. He sat by the fire, sharpening Jacob's hunting knife over and over, the scraping sound filling the silence. "I could go look for him," he said. "No." "I know how to ride now. He taught me." "Samuel, no." Maggie grabbed his wrist, stopped the knife. "If you go out there, you'll die, and then I'll have lost both of you." "But listen to me." She knelt in front of him, made him meet her eyes. "I know you want to help. I know you feel like you should be doing something. But sometimes the hardest thing is waiting. Sometimes the bravest thing is staying put when everything in you screams to run." Samuel's jaw trembled. "I can't lose him, Mama. Not him too." "You won't." "How do you know?" Maggie didn't know, couldn't know, but she said it anyway, because hope was all she had left to give. "Because Jacob McAllister is the stubbornest man I ever met, and he made me a promise. He said he'd never leave us." She squeezed her son's hands. "And Jacob don't break his promises." The night stretched on. Maggie dozed in the chair by the fire, jerking awake every time the wind howled louder. Samuel finally fell asleep on the floor, the knife still clutched in his hand. Sometime past midnight, the front door crashed open. Maggie was on her feet before she knew she was moving, her heart slamming against her ribs. Jacob stumbled through the doorway. He was covered in snow and ice, his face pale as death, his lips blue. Behind him, holding him up, was Silas. "Found him half a mile out," Silas said, his voice ragged. "Horse through him. Broke his leg." "Help me get him to the bedroom." They half-carried, half-dragged Jacob down the hall. He was conscious, but barely, mumbling words Maggie couldn't understand. His left leg hung at a wrong angle. Blood soaked through his pants above the knee. "The bone's through the skin," Silas said. "I seen this before. If we don't set it right, he'll lose the leg." "Then we set it right." "Ma'am, I ain't a doctor." "Neither am I. But we're all he's got." Maggie grabbed towels from the chest, poured whiskey from the bottle Jacob kept in his desk. "Samuel, wake up! I need hot water." The next hour was the longest of Maggie's life. She held Jacob down while Silas pulled the bone back into alignment. Jacob screamed, a sound that would haunt her dreams for years, then passed out. They splinted the leg with boards from the woodpile, wrapped it tight, and prayed. By morning, the storm had passed. Jacob's fever had not. "Infection," Silas said grimly. "Saw it take my brother. If we can't bring that fever down—" He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Maggie sat by Jacob's bed for 3 days. She wiped his brow with cool cloths, forced water between his cracked lips, changed his bandages, and cleaned the wound with whiskey, even when he thrashed and moaned. The children took over the ranch work, Samuel leading, Eleanor organizing, even little Caleb helping to feed the animals. On the third night, Jacob's fever broke. He opened his eyes, focused on Maggie's face, and croaked, "You look terrible." She laughed. It came out half-sob. "You almost died, and that's what you say to me?" "Just stating facts." His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "The cattle?" "Safe. Silas brought them in." "The children?" "Worried sick about you." "And you?" Maggie leaned down, pressed her forehead to his. "I've been better." "Liar." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "You've been holding this whole place together. I could hear you, you know, when I was... wherever I was. I could hear your voice." "What was I saying?" "You were telling me I wasn't allowed to die." His mouth twitched. "You were very bossy about it."
Someone had to be. They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breath mingling. "I'm sorry," Jacob said. "For what?" "For scaring you. For making you think—" "Don't." Maggie pulled back, looked him in the eyes. "Don't apologize for trying to save the herd. Don't apologize for being the man you are. Just—" her voice cracked. "Just don't leave me. Please. I can't do this without you." "You could. You're the strongest person I know." "That doesn't mean I want to." Jacob reached up, touched her face. His fingers were still cold, still weak, but his eyes were warm. "I ain't going anywhere," he said. "Got too much to live for now." Recovery was slow. Jacob spent 2 weeks in bed, then another 2, hobbling around on a crutch Silas carved from an oak branch. He hated being helpless, hated watching Maggie and the children do his work. But every time he tried to do too much, Maggie was there, pushing him back into his chair. "You're worse than a mule," she told him one evening, after catching him trying to saddle a horse. "Stubborn and stupid. That's no way to talk to your husband. My husband is supposed to be resting his leg, not gallivanting around the barn like a fool." "I wasn't gallivanting. I was checking on the horses." "Same thing." She crossed her arms. "Get back inside before I drag you." Jacob stared at her for a long moment. Then, despite everything, he laughed. "What's so funny?" "You." He shook his head. "When I first met you, you were half-frozen, bloody, desperate. Wouldn't look me in the eye. Now you're ordering me around like you own the place." "I do own the place. Half of it, anyway. That's what marriage means." "Is that so?" "That's so." He reached for her, pulled her close. "I love you, Maggie McAllister." She stiffened. It was the first time either of them had said those words. "Jacob." "You don't have to say it back. I know it soon. I know you've been hurt before. I just—" He pressed his lips to her hair. "I needed you to know." Maggie stood in his arms, her heart racing. Thomas had said those words once, back when they were young and stupid and thought love was enough. He'd said them, and she'd believed them, and then he'd left her with 5 children and a mountain of debt. But Jacob wasn't Thomas. Jacob had stayed. Jacob had fought for her. Jacob had almost died trying to provide for the family she'd brought to his doorstep. "I love you too," she whispered. She felt him exhale against her hair, felt the tension leave his shoulders. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He pulled back, looked at her face. "You sure? Because you don't have to." She kissed him. It was the kind of kiss that said everything words couldn't. All the fear and relief and gratitude and love tangled together, pouring out of her into him. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I'm sure," Maggie said. Jacob smiled, really smiled.
the kind that crinkled his eyes and softened his whole face. "Good, because I was planning on spending the rest of my life with you, and it'd be awkward if you didn't feel the same." "Awkward?" "Very awkward," she laughed. Actually laughed, full and bright and free. "Come on," she said, taking his hand. "Let's go inside. Dinner's almost ready." Spring came slowly to the valley. The snow melted, the ice broke on the creek. Green crept back into the world like a miracle. Jacob's leg healed well enough for him to ride again, though he'd always have a limp. He didn't seem to mind. "Gives me character," he said, when Maggie fussed over him. The ranch came back to life. Calves were born, foals took their first wobbly steps. The garden Maggie had planted before the storm pushed green shoots through the warming soil. And the children thrived. Samuel shot up 3 inches over the winter and started shaving peach fuzz from his chin. He followed Jacob everywhere, learning everything the man could teach him about ranching. Their bond deepened into something Maggie couldn't name. Not quite father and son, but something close. Eleanor finished reading every book on Jacob's shelf and started writing her own stories in a journal he'd bought her from town. She was quieter than her brother, more watchful, but there was a fire in her that Maggie recognized. Ruth had transformed from the frightened mouse who'd arrived at McAllister Ranch into a confident girl who ruled the chicken coop with an iron fist and talked to the animals like they were her best friends. Which, Maggie supposed, they were. Caleb was everywhere, into everything, a blur of energy and curiosity. He'd adopted one of the barn cats, a scraggly orange thing he'd named Biscuit, and the two were inseparable. And Grace. Grace was walking now. Running, really. Chasing her siblings around the yard, babbling in a language only she understood. She'd started calling Jacob Papa, without anyone teaching her, and the first time she said it, Maggie saw tears in his eyes. "She called me Papa," he said that night, voice rough. "I heard. I never thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "After Sarah and the baby, I never thought I'd hear that word again." Maggie took his hand. "You're a father now, Jacob. To all of them. You've earned it. I don't feel like I've earned anything. I just love them. That's what earning it means." One afternoon in late April, a letter came. The writer brought it to the house, handed it to Maggie with a tip of his hat, and rode away without a word. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Thomas. Her hands shook as she opened it. "Maggie, heard you got married. Heard you're doing well for yourself. Good for you. I'm writing because I wanted you to know I'm sorry. Not that it matters now, but I am. I was a coward and a fool, and you deserved better. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I think about those children every day. I think about you. I hope you're happy. I really do. Thomas." Maggie read the letter twice. Then she walked to the fireplace and threw it into the flames. "What was that?" Jacob asked from his chair. "Nothing." "Didn't look like nothing." She watched the paper curl and blacken. "It was a ghost. Just a ghost." "You want to talk about it?" "No." She turned to him. "I want to forget it ever existed." Jacob studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded and went back to his book. That night, after the children were asleep, Maggie stood on the porch and looked up at the stars. She thought about Thomas, about the man she'd married when she was 17 and stupid, and believed that love conquered all, about the years of disappointment and broken promises and slowly dying hope. She thought about the children, his children, sleeping peacefully inside a house he'd never set foot in. She thought about Jacob, who was nothing like Thomas, who said what he meant and meant what he said, who worked himself to exhaustion every day to provide for a family that wasn't even his blood, who looked at her like she was the sun and the moon and every star in the sky. The door creaked behind her. "Thought I'd find you out here," Jacob said, limping to stand beside her. "Couldn't sleep." "That letter still bothering you?" Maggie sighed. "It was from Thomas." Jacob didn't react, just waited. "He said he was sorry," she continued. "Said he thinks about the children every day." "Do you believe him?" "I don't know. I don't think it matters." She turned to face him. "He's not part of my life anymore, not part of their lives. He gave up that right when he walked away." "Does it make you sad that he reached out after all this time?" Maggie thought about it, really thought. "No," she said finally. "It makes me grateful. Grateful. Grateful that he left, because if he hadn't, I never would have found you." She took his hand. "I never would have known what it felt like to be truly loved." Jacob pulled her close. "You're a remarkable woman, Maggie McAllister." "I'm a tired woman who's had too many hard years. That's all." "No, that's not all." He tipped her chin up, made her look at him. "You're strong and fierce and kind and beautiful. You're the best mother I've ever seen. And you make me want to be a better man every single day." Tears pricked at her eyes. "Jacob." "I mean it. Every word." She buried her face in his chest. Let the tears come. Let him hold her while she cried out all the years of loneliness and fear and desperation. When she was done, she felt lighter, cleaner, like something had finally been washed away. "I love you," she said. "I know." "Arrogant man." "Maybe, but I'm your arrogant man." She laughed, despite herself. "Yes, you are." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Somewhere in the barn, an owl hooted. A horse nickered softly. And Maggie thought, "This is it. This is the life I was meant to live." All those years of suffering, all those years of barely surviving, they had led her here, to this place, to this man, to this family. It was worth it. Every single moment of pain was worth it. The next morning, Samuel found her in the kitchen making breakfast. "Mama?" "I was thinking." He shuffled his feet, suddenly looking less like a young man and more like the boy he still was. "About Mr. McAllister. I mean, Pa." Maggie's heart swelled. "What about him?" "I was wondering, do you think he'd adopt us? Officially, I mean. Make us his real children, on paper and everything." She set down her spatula, turned to face her son. "Where's this coming from?" "I don't know. He looked at his feet. "I want him to be my real pa, not just pretend. I want his name. I want to be a McAllister." Maggie walked to her son, lifted his chin. "I think," she said softly, "that Jacob would be honored. I think he'd say yes before you finished asking." Samuel's eyes brightened. "Really?" "Really. Why don't you ask him yourself? He's in the barn." Samuel was gone before she finished the sentence, nearly knocking over Eleanor as he ran out the door. Eleanor wandered in, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What was that about?" "Your brother's going to ask Jacob to adopt you all." Eleanor stopped, stared. "Adopt us?" "Officially, legally. Make you McAllisters." A smile spread across Eleanor's face, slow at first, then wide and bright. "Can I be there when he asks?" "Of course." Eleanor ran after her brother. Ruth appeared next, Caleb trailing behind her. "What's happening? Where's everyone going?" Maggie scooped Grace up from her high chair. "Come on, we're going to the barn.
Something important's about to happen. They walked across the yard as a family. Maggie, Ruth, Caleb, and Grace. The morning sun was warm on their faces. Birds sang in the cottonwoods. They found Jacob in the barn, Samuel standing in front of him, hands twisting nervously. "So," Jacob was saying, "you want me to adopt you?"
Yes, sir.
"All of you?"
Yes, sir.
Jacob looked at the children gathering in the doorway. His eyes met Maggie's. "What do the rest of you think?" he asked. Ruth stepped forward.
I think yes.
Caleb nodded vigorously.
Me too.
Eleanor just smiled. Grace, still in Maggie's arms, reached toward Jacob and said clearly,
Papa.
Jacob's face crumpled. He crossed the barn in 3 long strides, wrapped his arms around as many children as he could reach, and held on tight. "Yes," he said, voice thick. "Yes, I'll adopt you. Every single one of you." Samuel was crying. Eleanor was crying. Even Ruth, who rarely showed emotion, had tears streaming down her face. Maggie watched them, her husband, her children, her family, and felt her heart expand until she thought it might burst. This was what she'd been searching for. Not a place, not safety. This moment, this love. Home. The adoption papers arrived from Denver on a Tuesday in late May. Jacob held the envelope like it was made of glass. "This is it," he said. "Once I sign these, it's official. You're all McAllisters." Samuel stood at his shoulder, barely breathing. "What are you waiting for?" "Nothing," Jacob smiled. "Just wanted to remember this moment." He opened the envelope, spread the papers on the kitchen table, and picked up the pen. Maggie watched him sign each document. His hand was steady. His face was calm. But she saw the way his eyes glistened when he wrote Samuel's name. Eleanor's, Ruth's, Caleb's, Grace's. 5 signatures, 5 children, 1 family. When he finished, he set down the pen and looked at the children gathered around him. "It's done," he said. "You're mine now, legally, officially, forever." Samuel threw his arms around Jacob's neck. The others piled on, Eleanor laughing, Ruth crying, Caleb squeezing so hard, Jacob grunted. Grace toddled over and grabbed his leg, shouting, "Papa, Papa, Papa," like she understood exactly what was happening. Maggie stood back watching. Her throat was too tight for words. Jacob's eyes found hers over the tangle of children. "Thank you," he mouthed. She shook her head. "Thank you." Later that night, after the children were finally asleep, Jacob found her on the porch. "Room for one more?" She scooted over on the step. "Always." He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. The night was warm and soft, filled with the sounds of crickets and distant cattle. "I keep thinking about a year ago," Maggie said quietly. "This time last year, I was still in Missouri, still married to Thomas, still hoping he'd come back and everything would be okay. Do you miss that life?" "No." The word came quick and certain. "I miss who I thought I was. That woman who believed in fairy tales, who thought love was enough." She paused. "But I don't miss the life. Not anymore." "Good." Jacob took her hand. "Because this life is better." "Is it?" "You tell me. You got a roof over your head, food on the table, children who love you." He squeezed her fingers. "A husband who'd die for you?" "Don't say that." "Why not? It's true." "Because I almost lost you once. I don't want to think about losing you again." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to face her. "Maggie, I can't promise I'll never get hurt. Can't promise nothing bad will ever happen.
This life, this land, it's hard. It takes things from you. He touched her face. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay. Every single day. That's the best I got. She leaned into his palm.
That's enough. Yeah? Yeah. They sat together in the darkness, listening to the night breathe around them. I've been thinking, Jacob said after a while. About what? About the future. About this ranch. He shifted, pulled something from his pocket. About this. Maggie looked down. It was a ring, simple gold band, worn smooth with age. This was my mother's, Jacob said. She gave it to Sarah on our wedding day. After Sarah died, I put it away. Couldn't stand to look at it. Jacob, you don't have to. I want to. He held up the ring. I want you to have it. Not because we need another ceremony, not because anything's missing, just because... He paused, searching for words. Because you're my wife, really my wife, and I want you to wear something that means something. Maggie's eyes blurred with tears. Are you sure? Never been more sure of anything. She held out her left hand. Jacob slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. There, he said. Now it's official. Maggie looked at the ring, then at him. I love you, Jacob McAllister. Love you too, Maggie McAllister. She kissed him, soft and slow and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Come on, Jacob said. It's late, and tomorrow's going to be a long day. Why? What's tomorrow? Samuel's birthday. You didn't forget, did you? Maggie laughed. Of course not. I've been planning it for weeks. Planning what? You'll see. The next morning, Maggie woke Samuel with a plate of bacon and eggs and a kiss on the forehead. Happy birthday, baby. He groaned, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Mama, I'm 13 now. I ain't a baby. You'll always be my baby, even when you're 50 with grandchildren of your own. Samuel sat up, saw the breakfast. Is that all for me? Every bite. He ate like he was starving, which, Maggie supposed, was just how 13-year-old boys ate. When he finished, she took his hand. Come outside. There's something else. She led him to the barn, where Jacob stood waiting with the others. In front of him, saddled and ready, was a horse. A young mare, chestnut with a white blaze on her forehead. Samuel stopped dead. Is that... She's yours, Jacob said. Raised her myself from a foal. Been training her for months. Mine? My own horse? Your own horse. Samuel walked forward slowly, like he was afraid she might disappear. He reached out, touched her nose. The mare nickered softly and pushed into his palm. She likes you, Jacob said. Been waiting for you. I think she knew. Samuel turned and Maggie saw tears in his eyes. Pa, I don't know what to say. Don't have to say anything. Jacob put a hand on his shoulder. Just take care of her. She's counting on you. Samuel threw his arms around Jacob. Thank you. Thank you, Pa. Jacob held him tight. Happy birthday, son. The party that afternoon was small but perfect. Silas came, and the widow Martha Brennan from the neighboring ranch, and Henry Dawes, the lawyer, and even Sheriff Perkins, who decided to stay in Silver Creek permanently after the trial. They ate cake that Maggie had baked herself, 3 layers, chocolate, Samuel's favorite. They sang songs and told stories and watched the children run wild through the fields. At one point, Maggie found herself standing apart, watching it all unfold. A year ago, she'd been homeless.
desperate, begging for scraps. Now she was standing in her own yard, surrounded by people who cared about her, watching her children laugh and play without fear. Martha appeared at her elbow. "Quite a change, isn't it?" Maggie smiled. "You have no idea." "I think I do." Martha's eyes were kind. "I remember when you first came to town. People weren't exactly welcoming." "That's one way to put it." "They were scared. Hard times make people hard. But you proved them wrong." She patted Maggie's arm. "You proved all of us wrong. I didn't do it alone." "No, you had Jacob. And those children," Martha smiled. "And yourself. Don't forget that part. You could have given up 100 times. You didn't." Maggie thought about that. About all the moments when she'd wanted to quit. All the times when the road ahead seemed too long, too hard, too impossible. "I couldn't give up," she said quietly. "I had too much to live for." "And now?" Maggie looked at Jacob, who was showing Caleb how to throw a lasso, at Eleanor, reading under the cottonwood tree, at Ruth, chasing chickens with Grace toddling behind her, at Samuel, brushing his new horse with careful, loving strokes. Now I have even more. Summer blazed across the valley. The days grew long and hot. The cattle fattened on good grass. The garden exploded with vegetables, tomatoes and beans and squash and corn, more than Maggie knew what to do with. She canned and preserved and stored, filling the pantry for winter.
The children helped, even Grace, who mostly just made messes but loved being included. In July, Maggie realized she was pregnant. She didn't tell anyone at first, kept it to herself, turning the knowledge over and over like a secret treasure. She was 35 years old. She'd thought those days were behind her, but her body told her otherwise. The tiredness, the queasiness, the strange cravings for foods she'd never liked before. One evening, she found Jacob in the barn, mending a harness by lamplight. "Can I talk to you?" He looked up, saw something in her face, set down the leather. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." Jacob went very still. "Say something," Maggie whispered. He stood, crossed to her, took her face in his hands. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." "We're going to have a baby." "Yes." His face broke into the widest smile she'd ever seen. "Maggie, Maggie." He laughed, actually laughed, pure joy bubbling up from somewhere deep. "We're going to have a baby." He picked her up, spun her around, kissed her so hard she couldn't breathe. "Put me down, you fool," she gasped. "I'm going to be sick." He set her down immediately, steadied her. Sorry, I just—" He shook his head. "I never thought I'd have this again. A child of my own. After Sarah and the baby, I thought that part of my life was over. And now? Now, everything's different." He pulled her close, held her gently. "You've given me everything, Maggie. Everything I never knew I needed. You gave me the same." They stood there in the lamplight, holding each other, while the horses shifted in their stalls and the night pressed soft against the walls. The children took the news with varying degrees of excitement. Caleb wanted to know if the baby would be a boy, so he'd have someone to wrestle with. Ruth immediately began planning how to decorate the nursery. Eleanor announced she would teach the baby to read as soon as it could hold a book. Grace was too young to understand, but she seemed to sense something was different. She started following Maggie everywhere, patting her stomach and babbling. Samuel was quiet. Later that night, Maggie found him sitting on the porch, staring at the stars. "You all right?" He shrugged. She sat beside him. "Tell me what you're thinking." "It's stupid." "Nothing you think is stupid." He was quiet for a long moment. Then,
Are you going to love the new baby more than us? Maggie's heart cracked. Oh, Samuel, no, never. But it'll be yours and Pa's, really yours. You're just what? We're just adopted. We're not really his. Maggie took her son's face in her hands, made him look at her. Listen to me. I want you to hear this, and I want you to remember it for the rest of your life. She paused, making sure she had his attention. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. Jacob chose you. He chose all of you.
He signed papers and made promises, and committed his whole heart to being your father. That's more real than blood. That's more real than anything. But no buts. Her voice was fierce. You are Samuel McAllister. You are my son and Jacob's son, and nobody will ever change that. Not a new baby, not anything. You understand? Samuel's eyes filled with tears. Yes, ma'am. Good. She pulled him into a hug. I love you. I've loved you since the moment you were born. And I will love you until the moment I die, and probably long after that. Nothing changes that. Nothing. He held on to her like he was drowning, and she was solid ground. I love you too, Mama. I know, baby. I know. The baby came in February, during a snowstorm that reminded Maggie of the night she'd first arrived at McAllister Ranch. The labor was hard, harder than any of the others. Maggie was older now, her body worn from years of struggle. But Jacob was there, holding her hand, talking her through each wave of pain. You can do this, he said. You're the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong. You are. You always have been. 16 hours later, their son was born. He came into the world screaming, red-faced and furious, with a thatch of dark hair and his father's stubborn chin. He's perfect, Jacob whispered, holding the baby with trembling hands. Maggie, he's perfect. She was exhausted beyond words, but she smiled. Let me see him. Jacob placed the baby in her arms. She looked down at this tiny, miraculous creature, half her, half Jacob, wholly theirs, and felt something settle into place. The last piece of a puzzle she hadn't known was incomplete. Hello, little one, she whispered. Welcome to the family. They named him William, after Jacob's father. The children called him Will, then Willie, then various silly nicknames that changed by the day. He was adored from the moment he arrived. Samuel carried him everywhere, surprising everyone with his gentleness. Eleanor read him stories before he could understand a word. Ruth sang him lullabies. Caleb made him laugh with funny faces. Grace declared him her baby and refused to share. And Jacob was transformed. Maggie watched him with William, this big, weathered rancher, holding a tiny infant like he was made of spun glass, and fell in love with him all over again. You're good at this, she told him one night. At what? Being a father. He looked down at William, sleeping peacefully in his arms. I had practice with the other 5. It's different, though, isn't it? No. His voice was quiet but certain. It's not different at all. I love them all the same, every single one of them. Maggie believed him. She'd seen the proof every day for over a year now. Jacob? Thank you. For what? For stopping that day, on the road. For asking what I could do instead of sending me away. He looked at her, eyes soft. Best decision I ever made. I mean it. You saved us. No, he shook his head. You saved me. I was dying, Maggie. Slowly. Living alone on this ranch, working myself into the ground, waiting to join Sarah in whatever comes next. Then you showed up,
with your 5 children and your bloody lip and your pride, and you made me want to live again. So we saved each other. I reckon we did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep. What do you think the future holds? Maggie asked. Don't know. More hard work, more cold winters, probably more troubles we can't see coming. That doesn't scare you? Nope, he smiled. Because whatever comes, we'll face it together. You and me and all these children. That's what family does. Spring returned, as it always did. The snow melted, the land turned green. A new crop of calves arrived, and Samuel helped birth every single one.
On a warm afternoon in April, almost exactly a year from the day the adoption papers were signed, the entire family gathered for a photograph. It had been Eleanor's idea. A traveling photographer had come through Silver Creek, and she'd begged and pleaded until Jacob finally agreed to the expense. They arranged themselves on the porch of the main house, Jacob seated in the center with William on his lap, Maggie beside him with Grace. Samuel stood tall behind them, Eleanor and Ruth on either side. Caleb perched on the railing with his cat Biscuit draped over his shoulder. "Everyone hold still," the photographer said, "and try not to blink." The flash went off. The moment was captured. Later, when the photograph arrived, Maggie hung it above the fireplace. She stood looking at it for a long time. At Jacob's weathered face and gentle eyes. At Samuel's proud stance. At Eleanor's quiet intelligence, Ruth's shy smile, Caleb's mischief, Grace's joy. At William, too young to understand, but part of it all anyway. At herself, older than she felt, worn by years of struggle, but stronger than she'd ever been. "Mama?" Ruth tugged at her sleeve. "You've been staring at that picture for ages." "I know. I'm just remembering." "Remembering what?" Maggie thought about it. About the freezing night she'd arrived at this ranch with nothing but her children and her desperation. About the door that had finally opened when all others slammed shut. About the man who'd asked, "What can you do?" instead of, "What happened to you?" About the life they'd built, board by board, day by day, moment by moment. "Everything," she said finally. "I'm remembering everything." Ruth leaned against her. "Are you happy, Mama?" Maggie looked around the room, at the fire crackling in the hearth, at the books on the shelves, at Jacob's hat hanging by the door, at the worn furniture that had become familiar, beloved, at the life she'd found when she'd lost everything else. "Yes," she said. "I'm happy." "Good," Ruth smiled. "Me too." That evening, the whole family sat down to dinner together. Jacob said grace, something he'd started doing after William was born. Maggie served the food she'd cooked with her own hands. The children talked over each other, argued about nothing, laughed at jokes only they understood. William banged his spoon on the table. Grace fed him bits of potato. Caleb's cat wove between chair legs, hoping for scraps. It was chaos. Beautiful, messy, wonderful chaos. Maggie looked at Jacob across the table. He was listening to Samuel describe something that had happened in the barn, nodding seriously, asking questions. A year ago, she'd been a desperate woman with no hope and no future. Now she was surrounded by love. After dinner, after the dishes were done and the children were finally in bed, Maggie walked outside. The night was cool and clear. Stars blazed overhead. The mountains rose dark against the sky. Jacob found her there, as he always did. "Thinking again?" "Always." He put his arm around her shoulders. "What about this time?" "About how far we've come. About how much has changed." "A lot can happen in a year." "A lot did happen." She leaned into him. "Jacob?" "Hmm?" "If you could go back to that day on the road when you found us, would you do it all again?" He didn't hesitate.
Every single moment. The good and the bad. The hard times and the easy ones. All of it. I'd do it 1,000 times over. Even knowing how much trouble we'd be? Especially knowing that. He kissed the top of her head. You're the best trouble I ever found, Maggie McAllister. She laughed. Flatterer. Truth teller. They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd found each other against all odds. Maggie thought about the woman she'd been. Broken, desperate, begging for work from strangers who turned her away. She thought about the woman she'd become. A wife, a mother, a partner, in every sense of the word. She thought about the question that had changed everything. What can you do? Such a simple question. Such a simple answer. I can work. I can love. I can fight for what matters. I can survive. I can thrive. And in the end, that was what she'd done. Not alone. Never alone. But with a man who'd seen her value when no one else would. With children who'd trusted her to lead them through the darkness. With a family built not from blood, but from choice. Maggie looked up at the stars, the same stars that had watched over her that first terrible night when she'd walked through the snow with her children, believing she might die. She hadn't died. She'd lived. More than lived. She'd found home. Come inside, Jacob said. It's getting cold. She took his hand, followed him toward the warm glow of the windows. Behind those windows, her children slept. Her baby dreamed in his crib. Her life waited, full and rich and more than she'd ever dared to hope for. She stepped through the door. The cold stayed outside. The warmth wrapped around her like an embrace. And Margaret McAllister, once Margaret Thornton, once a woman no one would hire, once a mother with nothing but her children and her will to survive, finally knew peace. Not the peace of giving up, not the peace of settling for less, the peace of having fought for everything she had and won, the peace of a life well earned, the peace of home.